me inside your head now.
How much time was left?
You don't want to know.
I know exactly how much time was left. Hey everyone, welcome back to Installation 00 and another episode, the second episode in fact, of YAFI. Basically, you asked for it. It's a series where you can ask questions in my Discord in a dedicated channel and I will answer them to the best of my ability. I will also tag the respective question that's been asked with the name of the person that asked it in the video so you can quickly and easily jump to your question if you only really want your answer, but also you can just watch the entire video for the general enjoyment of everybody. As I pick out your questions, I react to them with the little Installation 00 emote in the Discord so you know that your question is on its way to being answered, and we all get to have fun along the way. So let's jump straight into this, and G asked, what were the casualty figures during the Human Covenant War across all species and races? Now, interestingly enough, I did a collaboration with Halo Cannon about 5 years ago. I do still miss him greatly. But in that collaboration, I endeavoured to figure out what the Covenant casualties were in terms of troops, and he endeavoured to find out what the human casualties were in terms of troops during the entirety of the Human Covenant War. We both dived really deep into the lore and really went through our paces trying to figure out what these figures were, and I will tag both videos down below for your enjoyment should you want to watch them. But ultimately the conclusion that we came to was that Halo Cannon figured out that about 28 billion human lives were lost during the Human Covenant War, and I calculated that 39.3 billion, nearly 39.4 billion lives were lost across all of the Covenant, meaning in total the death toll for the Human Covenant War across all species and races was nearly 67.4 billion individuals. That's around 8 times the total population on Earth today, and just over half the number of humans who have ever lived. It's really pretty terrifying when you pace it out like that. Next we got a question from Crimson Quill 086. And he says, comparisons between super soldier proliferation, Spartans, Jannissaries, rumble drugs, and nuclear proliferation in the 20th century. Was the Spartan program doomed in its original purpose from the start? Now, I went back and forth on this question a little bit to try to figure out exactly what it was that you were asking, but I think I figured out what you were saying, and I think you were asking, given the comparison, was the original purpose of the Spartan program inherently doomed to fail, much like how nuclear weapons didn't remain exclusive for long and led to global tensions? Well, the Spartan programs gave a temporary edge, but inevitably led to countermeasures and copycats like the Spartan 3, Spartan 4, insurrectionist super soldiers, etc., and it possibly destabilised the very system it was meant to protect, i.e. the UNSC. So was the idea of keeping a monopoly on super soldiers flawed from the beginning? Were Spartans always going to be outpaced, undermined, or made redundant, just like nuclear weapons were no longer a one-nation trump card? And really there are two possible angles that we can look at this particular problem. On one hand, yes, the Spartan program was doomed from the start, because it was born from desperation and suppression, basically targeting insurrectionists. It relied on secrecy, brutality, and moral compromise. Once the idea of bio-enhanced soldiers existed, it opened a Pandora's box. Others would try to replicate it, like Oni's later iterations of the Spartans or the insurrectionist enhancements. Just like nukes, Spartans could only prevent conflict through threat, not solve the underlying tensions. Their existence escalated arms races and militarization across human and Covenant lines alike. But on the other hand, no, it wasn't doomed, because Spartans were never meant to proliferate like nukes. They were surgical instruments, not strategic deterrents. The original goal wasn't global domination, but precision suppression of insurrection. Nuclear weapons created stalemates. Spartans, conversely, were agile assets, not weapons of mass destruction. And in practice, they became humanity's saviours, far beyond their original purpose. Next we have a question from Grub2517. We've all heard the vague description of flood carrier forms exploding with the force of a fragmentation grenade, but are there any further examples in the lore of how powerful those explosions really are? And he goes on to say there's extra credit if there's any scientific analysis we can make of what these explosive gases would be, and thus how powerful the explosion would be in real life compared to the games. And of course, I'm always one for extra credit, so the Halo 3 Primer Guide actually states that carrier forms explode with the force of a fragmentation grenade, so there is a direct lore reference to that figure. This is likely where the original phrasing came from. In gameplay, carrier forms explosions kill unshielded infantry within about 1.5 to 2 meters. They detonate instantly upon death, or by choice. Releasing infection forms, they can chain react if multiple enemies are nearby. And on higher difficulties, especially legendary, they can crack shields or severely wound even a Spartan. As far as additional lore cues, Halo the Flood, the novel, describes the smell and wet explosion of carrier forms as producing a horrid wet pop with shrapnel of bone and infectious fluid. Halo Wars 2's flood units include explosive variants, the Infestors and Bulge Pods, that similarly explode violently. The exploding flood mechanic in Firefight, particularly in Reach and Infinite, reinforces their inherent volatility. So while there's not much detailed canonical discussion, the general consensus across books, games and guides is that carrier forms do indeed detonate with lethal concussive force on par with conventional explosives, intended to kill nearby enemies and spread infection forms. But now let's go for that extra credit and dive into speculative xenobiochemistry. The Flood likely uses a biological mechanism analogous to chemical detonation, involving anaerobic bacterial fermentation producing volatile gases like methane and hydrogen sulfide, Flood-specific enzyme cascades triggering rapid gas expansion or combustion, possibly a bioacidic compound that rapidly oxidizes or reacts exothermically when exposed to air or triggered. This is very plausible, given their biology is hyper-adaptive, capable of forming muscle, chitin, and neurotissue almost instantly. Infection forms have some form of internal chemical weapon, needle-like injection or corrosive fluid. Carrier forms inflate grotesquely before bursting, suggesting gaseous expansion is central. And in real-world analogues, fermentation gases like methane, hydrogen, and hydrogen sulfides are flammable. Explosive organic compounds, nitrogen-based compounds like nitroglycerin, can form under certain amino acid breakdowns. Symbiotic microorganisms in flood tissue could act like volatile hydrocarbon generators. A standard frag grenade like the M67 has a yield of about 180 grams of composition B, with a fatal blast radius of around 5 meters and an injury radius of up to 15 meters. Assuming flood carrier forms match this, that would mean roughly equivalent energy release of 0.18 kilograms of TNT, with the energy equivalent of around 750 kilojoules, which is about the explosive power you'd get from 0.1 cubic meters of methane-air mixture at optimal fuel-air ratios, igniting rapidly. So, a ballooned biological sac filled with flammable gas, compressed under tissue and rupturing with a triggering enzyme? Plausible, especially if the flood can optimize combustion via catalytic or electrical discharge at the moment of death. Next, a question from Celes, the impossible life and mimetic immortality of Chips Dubbo, the legend. Well, Corporal Chips Dubbo, Australian accent, indomitable spirit, and a mouth that never quits. He's not a Spartan, not Oni, not a hero in the traditional sense. He's just a Marine, but he's also everywhere. He first appeared officially in Halo Combat Evolved, recurring in nearly every Halo game since: CE, Halo 2, Halo 3, Halo ODST, Halo Reach, Halo 4, Halo 5 and Halo Infinite in one regard or another. Always somehow surviving, quipping and showing up in places he absolutely shouldn't be. Key examples of his survival is that he was present during the fall of Reach, he fought on Installation 04, he survived the Flood outbreak, was on Earth during the Covenant invasion, he was on the Ark, somehow appears post-war in Infinite. Even Halo Wars, set decades earlier, includes a Marine with an Aussie accent and suspiciously familiar demeanour. So the question is, how the hell is he still alive? Well, I want to do a full-blown video on this, but let's just really briefly look at the statistical odds of survival for an average UNSC Marine in the major engagements Chips participated in. In order to do this, we're going to look at the major engagements, the survival rates for each of them, and then ultimately combine all of those because Chips survived all of them, which will give us our final odds. I won't go into the specifics now because I do have a full-fledged video that will have all of the specifics in this that will be eventually linked down below, but there's around about a 5% survival of the fall of Reach. Obviously Noble Team, most of the population and the majority of the UNSC garrisoned on Reach perished, but many did leave. In Station 04 there's less than a 1% chance. The Pillar of Autumn lost nearly everyone aside from Chief, Cortana and Johnson. The flood containment failure is around a 1%. Flood infection equals near total loss of life. The battle for Earth translates to around a 20% chance. Large scale combat, but some civilians and troops survived. The Ark has around a 5% chance of survival. Heavy Covenant and flood activity, minimal survivors. Post-war skirmishes varies, includes the Foreigner Tech, Didact Forces, Prometheans, the Banished. If we assume independence between events, which is already generous, the cumulative survival probability is around 0.00005%. That's 1 in 2 million. And that's without accounting for other missions or repeat exposure. So statistically, Chip shouldn't be dead. He should be dead a dozen times over. Purple Strawberry 1997 asked, how did the second CAS class carrier not get destroyed by the Cairo and the fleet? I thought Supermax can destroy it easily, especially because it's shown directly under it. Lots of people say it happened due to plot armour. By second, I assume you mean the carrier that Chief blows up shortly thereafter. See, there was another carrier before this that bypassed the Cairo as Chief traverses the Cairo's recoil arms. That one completely ignored the Cairo, blew through the model's debris field and headed straight for Earth, seemingly being the carrier that the Prophet of Regret was aboard. The second passes directly below the Chief as he exits the hangar bay holding on to the giant space pickle. In either case, the battle cluster of the Cairo, Athens and Malta were in a bad way by that point. Both the Athens and the Malta were destroyed, and the Cairo was really the only immediately local ODP in that region. The first carrier seemingly avoided getting directly hit, at least directly, by flying past the Cairo extremely close by. The closer the ship was to the Cairo, the harder it would have been for the Cairo to track it and hit the target. It might be that Cortana attempted to fire on it, but either missed or only scored a glancing blow off of the shields, and in doing so put the Cairo's main gun at a disadvantage to then be able to reorientate and take a shot at the second carrier, giving the second carrier the window it needed to dive below the station's immediate field of view, but ultimately putting it square in the sights of the Chief. The simple answer to this question is we really don't know for certain. It's never been fully explained. However, in early versions of the levels in Mombasa, there was dialogue between Cortana, Chief and Johnson discussing intel about what had recently happened. The dialogue is as follows.
It took 2 in the nose, then dropped into the atmosphere.
Who was first contact?
405th out of Diego Garcia. But don't expect a big welcome. Covenant wiped most of them out before they hit the ground.
So from this, there was at least the possibility back in the day that one of the carriers did take a couple of hits, probably being the carrier that Regret is on board, which may lend credit to the idea that one ship drew the fire, allowing the other ship to slip by. But I'll leave the final conclusions up to you. Just a Guy asked, with the Banished having their own Spartans, could Innies make their own Spartans given the right resources and intel? Yes, is the short answer. The long answer, which I'll be fully covering in a full video soon enough, is that super soldier programs are quickly becoming a much bigger deal in the Halo universe than they were previously. The insurrectionists developed a toxic chemical cocktail many years ago called rumble drugs. Rumble drugs are a class of highly dangerous performance-enhancing combat stimulants used by human insurrectionist forces in the Halo universe, particularly during the early years of the Human Covenant War at the height of the insurrection. Key features include hyper-aggressive enhancement, which increases strength, speed, and pain tolerance, mental instability, causing aggression, paranoia, and in some cases psychosis. Short-term use and long-term cost provides temporary combat superiority, but often at the expense of the user's sanity, health, or life. It's ultimately unstable, biochemically speaking, often leads to fatal overdoses or irreversible neurological damage. Rumble drugs are basically combat meth on steroids, used by desperate rebels to level the playing field against Spartans, even if it kills them in the process. Think of it as a brutal back-alley alternative to Spartan augmentation process, cheap, fast, and lethal. More recently, many megacorporations and private security companies have begun developing their own super soldier programs. Nothing quite like the Spartans in terms of raw power, stability and funding, but definitely nothing to sniff at. They've gotten hold of the Rumble drug recipe and mixed this with other human augmentation technology, including genetic enhancements, physiological augmentations and cybernetic implants to create their own fully fledged super soldiers, less subject to the more unpleasant aspects of Rumble drugs. And they're called Jannissaries. Even the Created, now led by High Auxiliary Sloan, have created their own transhuman cybernetic super soldiers in the form of the first Executor. A full video dive into that is available down below. B22 Black Eagle asked, why are some of the speeds in Halo so slow in atmosphere? For example, the Wasp is around 500 km per hour and the Banshee is only 100 km per hour. It seemed really slow given how far in the future we're talking about. The simple answer is the lore is being written to match up to what we see in gameplay, which causes problems. Obviously things in gameplay are slower than they would be in the lore because players need to feel that power trip of being a super soldier. They need to be able to react to things like bullets being shot, rockets being fired, vehicles being driven at them and being able to hijack aircraft, being able to dodge bullets. Things like that are very super soldier-esque and gives the player that power trip. So, obviously gameplay runs slower to allow us the breathing room we need to do that. Now it's widely accepted that the reason for this is due to the lore explanation of Spartan time, where Spartans' reactions ramp up during combat due to their enhanced physiology, augmentations, Mjolnir's reaction time boost and adrenaline, causing time to feel like it's running fast and slow at the same time. The problem is this effect doesn't match up perfectly with what we actually see in-game. However, since the possible lore explanation doesn't trump the gameplay mechanics, as far as the developers are concerned, they rewrite the lore within the confines of what we observe in gameplay, dialing speeds of vehicles and the like down to ridiculously low levels when in reality simply doubling down on the Spartan time explanation for the gameplay mechanic and then leaning into more realistic lore velocities would be enough for most people to be happy with this discrepancy. But I'm not on the dev team, so I can't influence this decision beyond putting it out there for consideration. And finally, a question from beastfromdaeast. How much time really was left on the Cairo bomb? I do want to know, Cortana. And initially I thought the answer to this would just simply be unknowable, because Cortana never tells us, we never read about it in any of the books, it's never spoken about beyond this one single cutscene and one single mention. So initially when this question was asked I thought, well, I'm just not going to be able to answer it. But then I realised that the answer comes in the cutscenes themselves. So I looked at the cutscenes, and something I noticed, particularly with the original graphics of Halo 2, because it doesn't have all of the additional noise and folly of the soundscape, the sound design within the Anniversary version. It's much simpler, much more basic, so to speak. You can hear a whining tone emitting from the bomb. And I realised that that whining tone emits from the bomb both when Chief originally deactivates it and when he reactivates it to blow up the CAS class assault carrier. And then I realised that because it's the same tone, I could match them up within video editing software and then see what cues and what happens on screen at what times and then figure out the discrepancy. So in trying to figure out how much time was left, we needed the baseline of it being activated and then exploding. So I took the cutscene of Chief reactivating it and then jumping away from the CS class assault carrier and then the thing exploding. And I cropped that bit of footage down to the moment that Chief activates the bomb to the moment we see the first detonation evidence on the surface of the CS class assault carrier immediately there afterwards. I then took the cutscene of Chief disarming the bomb on board the Cairo and I matched up the exact tone, the frequency of the whine being emitted from the bomb in both cutscenes and lined them up. Then it was simply a case of getting to the point that you hear the chime from the bomb showing that it had been deactivated in that cutscene and then cutting the footage there, and then ultimately any footage left after that point of the original footage of it exploding within the assault carrier gives you the time that was left between Chief deactivating the bomb and when it would have blown up, because ultimately the whines of the bomb spooling up match entirely. And barring any temporal jump cuts between these cutscenes, the final conclusion is that there were 613 milliseconds left before the bomb would have exploded, killed the Chief, Cortana, and everyone on board the Cairo. Chief had 613 milliseconds left on the clock, which is just yet another example of how much of a lucky SOB he really is. And that concludes this episode of YAFI, You Asked For It. If you want to ask your own lore questions, hop over to the Discord. There is a channel there waiting for you. Ask away, and I will do my best to answer it. And until next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, kindly tap that like button, and if you're not already subscribed and want to see more stuff like this, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. Pop a comment down below telling me what you thought of today's video, or if you want me to cover something specific in the near future. I want to take this opportunity to thank and give shoutouts to my patrons and YouTube supporters: Spartan10148, my singular contender class ancilla, the triumvirate of mines within my installations Metarch, Falcon, Jordan and Poseidon, my 7 installation monitors Selphia, Ashley, Esoteric, Spartan1029, Chris, Orion and Shane, the crush of sub-monitors Legion, Ryan, Lebrat, Spartan0137, Element 0, J3, Cult, Evermore's, Personal Devil, Scion Esports, Phantasma, Ashton and 191 Shaken Lightbulb, my fleet of Strato Sentinels, my most loyal of Enforcers, and every single one of the awesome people supporting the channel over on Patreon. My Tier 0 Transcendent YouTube members Spartan137, again, Maury, Jimbo and Balaz, and all other YouTube members keeping my installation functional on that glorious vacuum energy. I cannot thank you all enough. Shout out to John because... And if you like what I'm doing here, consider supporting the channel on one of the support links in the description to net yourself some tasty merch and help keep the channel going. Take it easy everyone, and find peace in the domain.